Hello, this is Community Unity Now, the D Tycoon Show. My co-host Bill Morton will be back again next week. I am Trudy Leong, administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. And today, our very, very special guest is Illinois Supreme Court Justice Joy Cunningham. How are you today,
I'm
Justice?
very well. Thank you so much for having me on, Trudy.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to thank you very much because I've been an election judge for 12 years. And then whenever there is a judicial ballot, I always hear the voters telling us, I'm not going to vote the ballot because I don't know who those people are. And then that's why we invited you and some other justices and judges on this show and other of our interview shows to bring the message to our community, our audience about who many of these judges are and what they do, the role that the judicial branch plays in our community. And believe it or not, the last election, the turnout was huge, like 80% in my precinct voted the judicial ballot, and there were actual voters that came in and told me, the most important thing is for me to vote the judicial ballot. Where is the judicial ballot?
I think that's really wonderful because I think that you're doing a public service by educating people about the importance of the third branch of government, which I often call the forgotten branch, because many people forget or they're uninformed, so they don't vote for the judges. And if you think about it, judges have a very basic and granular impact on the lives of ordinary people, much more so than members of the other two branches of government. So knowing who sits on your court, very, very important.
Mm-hmm. And you taught me so much too. Bill and I, we had no idea about all the work that the administrative work, not only like sitting on the bench, all the it's like a different branch of like making rules and etc.
Absolutely. The third branch of government, which is the judiciary, the Supreme Court is the head of the third branch of government. So we would be analogous to like the governor's office. The governor's office is at the top of the executive branch. Mm-hmm. The Senate and the legislature are at the top of the legislative branch, and the Supreme Court is at the top of the judicial branch. So we are responsible for the administration of the court system in the entire state of Illinois. Illinois has 102 counties, and there is a courthouse in every one of them, and we're responsible for that. We're responsible for pretrial services. We are responsible for licensing all of the attorneys who are licensed to practice law in the state of Illinois. We're responsible for the agency that administers and oversees the bar exam. We're responsible for probation services. Just many, many other administrative matters that makes the third branch of government function. It's the responsibility of the Supreme Court. So it's a busy place.
And you even have your, let's say, Chicago City Council, they have their committees. Even your judicial branch has the committees as well.
Absolutely. The court system actually functions administratively through a series of committees and commissions that the court has established to help us run the system. There is the Commission on Civility in the Profession, there's the Historic Preservation Commission, there's the Commission on Elder Law, there is the Lawyers Trust Fund, there's the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission, just lots of different committees and commissions that are the administrative bodies that carry out the actual work of making the court system function.
What is the Lawyers Trust Fund? I never heard of that one before.
The Lawyers Trust Fund is an entity that provides, when a lawyer takes a client in, they can't commingle money. They have to make sure the money is set aside in a separate trust account. And so it's an account that administers say a lawyer needs to have some kind of mental health care or something of that nature, the Lawyers Trust Fund has the resources that helps to provide the funding for that.
Oh, so it's more like a benevolent.
Well, it's for
Funding source?
lawyers and judges, and it's established through the money that lawyers and judges pay into the system and their registration fees. So it's all to be kept in, it's to make sure that we have a healthy population of lawyers and judges. So if you are suffering from something that requires you, say, a substance abuse problem or something like that, because lawyers are human beings too, the Lawyers Trust Fund would be one of the entities that may be tapped for funding those kinds of treatments and programs and so on.
Lots of stress in the.
Absolutely. But the practice of law is a stressful practice, and recently the Commission on Civility in the Profession commissioned a study on bullying. And one of the bits of information or factual information that came out of that was the amount of stress that lawyers function under, and sometimes that stress is either relieved or enhanced by different stressors and factors in their everyday life and profession.
Could you give us some of the findings of the commission? It's very prevalent, right? Bullying in the lawyer's profession.
Well, the executive director of the Commission on Civility in the Legal Profession is a woman by the name of Erica Harold, and she is very interested in that topic and in the well-being and mental health of lawyers. And so she commissioned this study, and it would be great to have her on your program one of these days just to tell you how that came about. But the study they brought in an outside agency that actually does this kind of work and this kind of study, and they interviewed 6,000 lawyers across the state of Illinois, and the findings were quite revealing. There's a lot of bullying that happens in the legal profession, and it mainly happens to women, people of color, LGBTQ plus people, and younger people. Those are the categories that they were able to identify are more subject to bullying than the profession as a whole. And it was very shocking to me to find out that as many as, and they limited the study to a 1-year period from 2022 to 2023. And a surprising percentage of lawyers said that they had left their jobs, a particular job, because of bullying. And that percentage ended up being a number of 10,000 lawyers throughout the state of Illinois had changed jobs over that period of time because of bullying.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a lot, because
That's a lot of
6,000 people were lawyers were
That's right.
interviewed, and 10,000 in the same time.
Yeah, because once the study contacted one or two people, then they involved other people. So the number of cohorts that were in the study ended up being many, many more thousands than 6.
And it was a groundbreaking study, because nobody in the whole country did.
That's right. It had never been done before, and it was a study whose time had really come, because, as you see more people, non-traditional groups entering the profession of the practice of law, I think we have to have a lot more diversity, equity, and inclusion training, a lot more sensitivity and civility training, and all of the things that in the past used to be considered, you're a tough lawyer if you're uncivil and if you behave in a certain way. We now know that really isn't true. What that does is it causes a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a trailblazing attorney as well. When you started and just work your way up.
That's true, and I think that I understand why this study is so important, because sometimes when you are the first of anything, of any group or any category, it's very lonely. And it's stressful, and you feel a tremendous amount of pressure to perform and to make sure that you're not going to make it terrible for those who come after you who are of a similar gender or racial makeup. And so it's stressful, and I think this is a study whose time had long come. And so I'm really glad that that Executive Director Harold commissioned this study, because it was sorely needed.
Did you ever before felt that you were bullied?
Absolutely. But, I've always tried to use those instances as teaching moments, not only for myself, but for whoever was doing the bullying. And yes, and bullying takes many different forms. It can be as simple as just excluding you from, if you're the only woman in a group of people, you're being excluded consistently from the conversation, or from having access to certain types of work that the other lawyers are getting, or just being spoken to in a very derisive or demeaning way. So there's so many different forms of bullying, and sometimes is very subtle. And how you deal with it, I think, is really it's a very individual kind of thing.
Well, it strengthens you too, as you because there are so many different situations, and then you learn from those situations.
Absolutely. You have to, if you're interested in your profession and you want to continue practicing law, and I've been practicing for many years now. I've been practicing law before I became a judge. I had been practicing for over 20 years. Now I've been on the bench for a number of years. So I've been licensed to practice law in Illinois for over 30 years. And I can tell you that during that time, especially earlier in my career, when there weren't as many women and there weren't as many people of color, the opportunities to be discriminated against or bullied were much greater than they are today. So of course I had to navigate that, and it does teach you how to handle situations that you may not otherwise have had to encounter.
Because when I encounter attorneys, it seems that they're very civil. They try to talk things out outside the courtroom before even any trial or anything starts. They try to reach a settlement before. They always try to talk with opposing counsel. That's what I always hear.
That's true.
But there is that bullying. It just seems
absolutely. And I always say that settling cases and settling issues is always a good thing, because if you settle it, you know what your tolerance level is for settlement, or for what you can afford to either put forward or tolerate. So when you settle, you know what you're getting. If you don't settle and you allow someone else to make that decision for you, then it may be something that's outside the realm of your tolerance level, but you can't do anything about it because somebody else has made the decision and they don't know what your limitations may be. So I think most lawyers understand that, and that's why I think there has been a tremendous movement in recent years towards mediation and so on, to try to resolve your differences without actually fighting it out in the courtroom.
How is the role of a judge in encouraging a settlement? Does the judge play any role in that?
Absolutely. Judges do it all the time. And, depending on what the nature of the case is, that may be the best alternative and the best resolution for all parties. And judges do that all the time. I know they have, in the appellate court, for example, there is a formal settlement committee that they have, that staffed, it's the judges who sit on it rotate, but they try to get the parties to settle their case before oral arguments. And in the circuit court, there's a mandatory arbitration threshold for cases that are under a certain amount of money that's being sought. And those cases go to mandatory arbitration. And they also have mediation. Many of the really large cases, those lawyers understand the nuances of litigation, and they also understand the uncertainties of litigation. And many of the really large value cases are mediated to settlement for that reason. They know that if they can mediate a settlement with a very skilled mediator, the outcome will be, number one, much more expeditious. You can get it done more quickly, and it may be more economical for the client, and you will end up with a resolution that you can tolerate because you agreed to it and it wasn't something that was imposed on you.
Is it usually a mediator that helps reach a settlement, or are there attorneys that are very skilled at settling and they do it on their own?
Well, both, but often with really big exposure cases, there are skilled attorneys on both sides, or however many sides are involved, and there is a skilled mediator who is like the leader of the orchestra, so to speak. That is a person who knows what the roles of each of the participants are, and he or she will be able to guide the people to a settlement. But it's very unusual that the lawyers just sit down among themselves and mediate it to a settlement. I almost think of mediation just by its very definition as having a central person who is the mediator that helps to direct how the conversation and the resolution ultimately goes.
Is there a certain office or a department in the judicial branch that does the mediation? What is that called? No?
Mediation is usually done outside the court system.
Oh.
And there are many retired judges who, as the second phase of their careers, are now doing mediation and arbitration because they have the skills. You know, they've done this thing of being a judge, so they know all the rules of evidence. They know what is likely to happen if that case is not settled and it goes to trial. So they are very willing to tell the lawyers, you know, here's what you can expect to happen if we're not able to settle this. And the lawyers understand that because they recognize that this is an experienced judge who is now retired, and so they believe if we can settle it with this judge, it's probably better because if we go to trial, this is probably what's going to happen, and it's not a good result for us. So I think having a skilled mediator is absolutely essential to getting your case settled in a way that I think is acceptable to all parties.
So it's usually in the higher profile cases, the cases that involve more money.
I would say that that's, by and large, that's true.
I think that a lot of our audience, look to you as a role model because you have accomplished so much and reached you are a sitting justice on the Supreme Court. Of course, there is the election coming up and for retention, but you are a role model. However, could you tell us, we were talking about bullying earlier. There is the glass ceiling. And is the glass ceiling a kind of bullying as well?
In a way, it is because, and I would like to say that the glass ceiling now has lots of cracks in it because there have been many women who have been able to make a crack in the glass ceiling so that they can get through it and pull others behind them. It is a kind of bullying because, as we know, in certain professions, and the law is certainly no exception, there were certain things that were considered to be traditionally male professions, and the practice of law was certainly one of them. So there were many, many areas in the practice of law where women were, I wouldn't say not welcome, but they certainly weren't encouraged. And so in order to make your way into that section of practice, you really had to, I think, fight your way in, so to speak. So yes, I would say that having a glass ceiling at all is a type of bullying, and I'm happy to say that I think that's diminishing.
Mm-hmm. What are the further barriers and further issues that your judicial branch need to address, if you could think of something, because the bullying, that's a major issue that is being addressed. Are there any other issues that you could think of now?
Well, I think, the judicial branch itself has to do whatever we can to enhance the public trust, because courts all across the country, not just state Supreme Courts. Now, I'm very happy to say that the Illinois Supreme Court and the courts here in our state still have a great deal of respect from the public, and we respect the public as well. On the federal level, there's been some erosion of the public respect for the courts, and I think because citizens see the court system as a whole, just as one big system, if the public doesn't respect judges on the federal level, it sometimes has an impact and has downstream ramifications for us on the state courts. And most judges across this country recognize that. So I think what's happening is that we're doing a lot more, certainly in Illinois, we're doing a lot more community outreach on our court, just to humanize the court and to bring the court to the people so that they understand that we are there as, we're basically public servants, and we are there to do the bidding of the forefathers in carrying out the Constitution and making sure that we keep the Constitution, the parameters of the Constitution intact with respect to the other two branches of government, as well as people who come before the court for justice. So I think community outreach is something that our court, our Illinois Supreme Court, has really focused on in the last couple of years. For example, we have done what we call riding the circuit, which traditionally we hear cases in Springfield, in the Supreme Court building in Springfield, which is a magnificent structure that all Illinoisans should see at some point in their lives. But lately, in the last couple of years, we have heard court outside the Supreme Court building. So we heard court here in Chicago at Chicago State University. We converted one of the student areas into a major courtroom. We had about 500 students attend, and we did that. Last year, we conducted court at Northern Illinois Law School in DeKalb, and in the spring of next year, we're going to Southern Illinois. This is just an effort to bring the court outside the courthouse to the people, and when we do that, we usually have law students, high school students, college students, and it's open to the public.
Where could our audience find where the Supreme Court will be holding court?
By checking the Supreme Court's website.
Yes.
The Illinois Supreme Court website is www.illinoissupremecourt.
Okay. And so that kind of outreach is awesome. If I guess, do you find that there are more people, more of the public going, attending the court now?
Not in the Supreme Court. I find that in the lower court, certainly in the trial court level, and to some extent the appellate court, when there are cases, there will be members of the public in the audience. The Supreme Court doesn't usually have just a random members of the public coming to watch oral arguments. I wish they would, because I think it's educational and it's essentially their court at work, but we don't have that much of it, and perhaps it's because we sit in Springfield. But the Supreme Court's website tells you when we're going to be hearing court, what cases are going to be heard that term. There's lots of information there.
Okay, remember, you are allowed to attend at the oral hearing,
arguments.
Arguments, yes. All right. Justice Joy Cunningham, if our audience wants to learn more about you and the Supreme Court, just repeat the Supreme Court website, and where could people find more information about you?
Illinois Supreme Court It's a website and it has my bio. It has everything about each Supreme Court justice is on our website, and about the court and its programs and where we'll be sitting.
Okay. Thank you so much, Justice Joy, Illinois Supreme Court Justice Joy Cunningham, for joining us on Community Unity Now, the D. Tycoon Show. I am Trudy Leong, Administrator of the Rogers Parker Chamber of Commerce. My co-host, Bill Morton, will be back again next week. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again next week.